Hello. So this week I decided to do some little something different. I did follow the assignment guidelines of sort of answering those three questions, and I'll do that in the video. But then I just want to quickly share. I went ahead. This is an area of interest for me and an area that where our district I think needs to see a lot of growth. So I went together and sort of put together a shell of a presentation that I'd like to use with staff um, coming up. So that is why this might look a little different than what other people's look like. So first and foremost, to answer the three questions as an administrator, what is the leadership responsibility in helping stakeholders move? Um, I think that the administrator's responsibility is a couple things. First and foremost, it's showing the research. Staff are much more likely to be on board about something, a change that's difficult when they trust you and when you're able to explain why you're doing something. And staff are willing to do hard things together um, when they have a clear vision of sort of where they're going and why they're going there. So that's a couple different things. That's showing the research and making sure staff understand that isn't me walking in and telling them what to do, that this is actually based off of what researchers say, and there's nobody who can say it better than the researchers themselves. Second is setting really clear expectations for staff. I mean, there's a piece of this that's just like this isn't negotiable. We have equity non-negotiables in our district, and the grading practices that we currently have, excuse me, are not equitable. So it's not really an option to be on board, but we also need to provide time and training for staff to make the shift. So we want to sort of um, give a gentle push to people in the right direction, but also provide them the time they need to make that shift happen. So I don't have that written here, but I also think it's sort of providing a timeline for staff and allowing that implementation process to take place over a reasonable amount of time and not expecting every single shift to take place at once. This year, we are spending a lot of work on selecting essential standards and moving in slowly towards a standards based at the elementary schools. But teachers are still using points and percentages and have their own policies about late work. And we don't have a lot of consistency, but at least every grade is teaching and assessing the same essential standards. So we feel really good that we've sort of stepped in that direction. Question two, how will you handle staff members that do not want to participate in the new grading practices? Again, clear expectations I think is really important. Um, it's not really negotiable. Explaining the why again of like, well, we as a district really need consistency, and here's why we need consistency. It's not helpful for students or for families if each teacher is setting their own policies about grading and you have to learn the rules of every new class you enter. That's just not the best way to do it. I would also hold listening sessions, give teachers time and space. Sometimes just saying, like, wow, this shift feels really hard, and here's what feels hard about it, or here's what I don't understand about this new way to grade, or wow, this really conflicts with my beliefs about what I'm supposed to be doing here as a teacher. Giving time for teachers to be able to air those concerns and just have somebody to listen. And then providing coaching cycles for teachers who continue to struggle, who want support, or who are just um, really having a hard time getting on board with the new grading practices. It can be true that sometimes you just implementing something and teachers having to try it out um, can work at times as opposed to just waiting for every single person to be on board before you make a shift. I think there's a balance of like asking for staff input, and sometimes the leader just needs to help move a building in the right direction. Um, so I would definitely want to include staff in the process, but I think with our equity non-negotiables, like it's just not an option for staff to pick their own grading practices at this point. We need consistency as a district. And number three, how will you balance what research is saying on this topic with traditional beliefs? Um, I think especially I've been thinking a lot about that students expect something and families expect something. So messaging and consistency of messaging is really important. I just helped draft a message to families in our school newsletters that will go out to every elementary parent about sort of the shift that we've begun towards standards-based grading and sort of what we're doing and why we're doing it and what they can expect and how kids' progress towards standards will be reported. Um, I would also probably want to do a presentation about the changes to the school board, making sure they understand the why, so that if they're hearing from families, they can understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're going to implement and roll that out. Again, reference back to the equity non-negotiables. That's part of our communication to families as well. We are not apologizing for those. That's kind of like what our district is founded on. And so making sure families know like that's what's important here that we're going for. Um, and that's why we're making these changes. And a parent question and answer session might be helpful so parents can share concerns or ask questions about the new format of report cards and sort of what grading practices are going to occur. I think there can be a misconception among parents and teachers that sort of this is going easy on kids or it's not preparing them for the real world. But as is often pointed out, like it's in adult life, even a pilot's license or an LSAT or these really high stakes tests often come with a retake where you can earn full points. So why are we not offering that to young people whose brains are not even fully developed yet? So just having some of those conversations and being a little bit patient because a lot of this is a mindset shift and just going into that conversation with a listening ear. And that doesn't mean that we listen and change what we're doing necessarily, but that we listen and can explain why we're doing what we're doing and that we do hear people's concerns and we'll do our best to alleviate them. So I'll just then real quick kind of click through. Where's my present button? I don't know. Okay, well, I'll just kind of click through from over here of how I would run this out to staff. So we have our equity non-negotiables, which I would use to begin. Working agreements. I love this idea of the elephant in the room, right? So grading is often a very sensitive issue that people have hard, like long held beliefs about. And acknowledging that and that people may feel some strong responses to what we're going to talk about today and asking teachers to think about that. Why is this such a thing that's held dearly to teachers? I read somewhere that this is like the last pillar of autonomy for teachers. So that could be a piece of it, is like they had control. It's maybe a little of the control over this. I'm not sure, but to let people discuss and think about what community agreement they're going to hold with them as we talk about some tough things. I had an idea to take some of these beliefs that people might have and sort of do like an agree disagree and have them walk across the room and then either share out or just look around and notice where everybody is. And I put quite a few of them on here. We could pare that down. But things like I include extra credit in my grading practices. If nothing else, I think people would see that there's quite a range of how that looks and that many other teachers do or don't. And it's not about judging them. It's about understanding we need consistency as a district and we don't currently have it. Then just a little framing that some of the guiding practices may be based on like, why are you grading the way you are? Some may be based off your beliefs and values. Others are just like tradition. Here's how things have been set up. Some are school systems and structures, right? Like this is what my principal told me, or this is how our report card looks. Sometimes your beliefs may have been at odds with the school system. But either way, like we all need to sort of move together towards more equity in grading. And then I said I would lead staff in a discussion of what the current status is, right? So what are our current practices? And again, we don't have consistency. So hopefully that would be one of the things that would come out. But like, so what are we communicating with families and how are we communicating it? What scale rubric points and percents are used as success criteria and who develops them? We are all over the map. We have some grades that are pretty closely aligned with standards-based grading and others who are just kind of like making up random point values and calculating percentages based off some pretty arbitrary stuff. And then factoring in things like effort and attendance as well. So thought we'd lead a discussion about that and then share these research-based best practices. Many of these were from the Ken O'Connor 15, but others were just from other resources we had this week and other places. So I'm not going to read these all here, but basically thought we would share these with people and then give them time to dig in and say, okay, so at your table, pick one of these best practices and do a little research. And I've linked some resources here for you. Dive in and basically prepare an elevator speech, like why that is what research is telling us. And so teachers could choose to pick something that sort of challenges a belief that they've held. If they are like, prove it, show me more information that says that that's the case, they could find it. Then they would give their little short elevator speech to their table and finally share out any aha moments with the whole group. And those are the resources that I linked that teachers use to do that sort of data dig, because again, I think it's more important for them to sometimes see it from the researcher as opposed to just me saying, here's what the research says. And finally, a little reflection. What's your reaction to seeing the data? So one thing that squares with you or confirms something you already thought, and then one thing that challenges your thinking and practice. And I would actually have teachers journal that and then share out anything they wanted to share. And then finally, sort of a closing of processing what we've learned today, of what benefits might there be to making these shifts and what challenges do they anticipate. I actually might change that to like an exit slip. I kind of like the idea of seeing, look at that live editing. But I like the idea of seeing what challenges they're anticipating and sort of taking that, and then I could follow up with staff who I feel like are either overwhelmed or have specific questions. So that's that. And then just a quote from Maya Angelou. I'm sure we've all seen this: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. I thought that really applies because many people might leave feeling like, oh, wow, I've really like screwed up grading forever. And that makes me feel terrible. And that's not the point. The point is that now if we're learning new things, we as a system have to shift to be more equitable. And finally, references. So thanks for listening, and hopefully